It's like watching a party through a window you weren't even told existed. My name is L'Oreal, and if you've ever felt like the last person standing in a room that used to feel like home, then you'll understand what happened to me that morning. It was supposed to be just another Thursday, but when I opened my phone, everything shifted. There it was, a flood of joyful messages lighting up the family group chat. My cousins sharing excited gifs of beach umbrellas and ocean waves. My brother dropping links to restaurants near the shore. Even my usually tech-averse aunt managed to send a photo of her new sun hat with a string of emojis. Everyone was buzzing about the annual family vacation, except me. I hadn't received a single message. I stared at the screen for a moment, numb. The trip, the one we always talked about, planned together, looked forward to. At least, I thought we did. My chest tightened as I scrolled back through the chat history. Somehow, they had been planning for weeks. Booking rooms, choosing car rentals, making dinner reservations, and no one had noticed I wasn't there. Or worse, maybe they had. I texted my mom, "Hey, did I miss something? I wasn't added to the trip plans?" Her reply came after 10 excruciating minutes. "Oh, honey, everything's full now. Maybe you can find something nearby?" No apology, no explanation. Just a polite, indifferent brush-off. I sat there, phone in hand, blinking back the sting in my eyes. It felt like more than a simple oversight. It felt like being erased. And what crushed me the most wasn't the missed trip. It was the pattern I suddenly realized had always been there. This wasn't the first time I was forgotten. There was the time they all went to Aunt Marie's surprise retirement party and told me after the photos were posted. The time my brother got promoted and they had a family dinner, one I was never invited to. And that promise my mom made, "Next year we'll do your birthday big, I swear." But it came and went, replaced by some cousin's engagement brunch. Again and again, I had been the invisible one. The afterthought. I used to tell myself they were just forgetful, busy. But now, it felt intentional, like I was quietly being moved to the edge of the picture, frame by frame. And it stung, because I had tried. God, I had tried so hard to be seen. Even as a kid, I was the one who never caused trouble. The one who stayed in my room drawing floor plans for imaginary homes, while my brother set off fireworks in the backyard. While Laura charmed everyone with her loud laugh and dance routines, I sat quietly with a sketchbook in hand, hoping someone would ask what I was drawing. They never did. They called me the serious one. The quiet girl. But they never asked what I was serious about, so I stopped expecting to be the center of attention. But I never stopped hoping the Fevod remember me. That maybe this time they'd save me a seat. I guess that hope finally broke that morning. Not loudly, not dramatically, just a quiet snap somewhere deep inside. Because being forgotten by strangers is one thing, but being forgotten by the people who raised you, that's a scar that settles deep. As I sat there, surrounded by silence, I realized something else. I was done shrinking myself to fit their blind spots. Maybe they had left me out of the vacation, but this time, I wouldn't just accept it and fade away. I picked up my laptop, opened a new browser tab, and typed 4 words that would change everything. Luxury villas near Marbella. I didn't book anything that day. I just stared at the screen, frozen in that strange mix of anger, sadness, and something else. A hollow ache I couldn't quite name. But I'd felt it before. This sharp, quiet sting of being invisible. It wasn't new. Not by a long shot. It had been there for years. Hidden in birthday candles that never got lit. In empty folding chairs at school plays. In every moment I told myself, it's okay, they love me. They're just busy. But maybe I had always been the girl they forgot. And maybe, just maybe, it started long before I ever had a phone in my hand. Just before I clicked Book Now, a notification popped up. A story from my cousin Jenna. I tapped it. There they were. My entire family smiling wide on a balcony overlooking the sea. Mom swirling a glass of sangria. My brother laughing with his wife. Aunt Marie twirling in her sundress. They didn't just forget me, they were already there. That's when it hit me. I wasn't just left out, I was unnecessary. And that's when I decided, if I wasn't going to be included in their story, I would write my own. Maybe it didn't start with Marbella. Maybe it started with the empty chair at my elementary school graduation. I remember standing on stage, a paper certificate in my hand, eyes darting across the audience. Each time a name was called, kids would run down to hugs and camera flashes. I stood there a little longer than most, waiting, hoping. Mom had said she might leave work early. She didn't. Instead, I walked home alone with my certificate rolled up like a secret no one asked about. And that wasn't the last time. There was the year I made the honor roll 3 times and no one mentioned it at dinner. The year I taught myself piano from YouTube because lessons were too expensive. While my brother got baseball coaching, new gear, and a team party when he struck out half the season. My birthdays were always afterthoughts. Once, I came home to a store-bought cake still in the box, a candle already melted sideways. "Sorry, work ran late," Mom said. "Let's sing real quick." We did, and then she took a call and left the room. It wasn't cruelty. That's the hardest part. They weren't mean, they weren't abusive. They loved me. I know they did. But I was the low-maintenance child, the one they didn't have to worry about, the one who handled disappointment without making noise. I was a quiet achiever. I did well in school, never broke curfew, always cleaned up after myself. I never needed help with homework, never threw tantrums, never made scenes. So they forgot me. Because I made it easy to forget me. At least that's what I told myself, again and again, to protect the fragile loyalty I had to my family. But deep down, I knew it wasn't okay. It hurt. It hurt to love people who didn't see you, to cheer for them loudly while they whispered your name, or didn't at all. I remember being 15 and winning a statewide architecture design contest. It was a big deal. The school made an announcement. They even wanted to feature me in the yearbook. When I told my parents, they smiled. Dad said, "That's great, honey," without looking up from his phone. Mom asked if I remembered to clean out the dishwasher. That night I stared at the ceiling and thought, maybe if I had broken a window instead of winning something, they would have noticed. I didn't want to be dramatic. I didn't want to play the victim. But I couldn't shake the feeling that I lived inside parentheses, always there, but never the sentence. I loved my family, truly. But love doesn't always erase pain. And being the easy one didn't mean I didn't need to be chosen. That's what Marbella woke up in me. Not just the sting of a forgotten vacation, but a lifetime of being placed on the shelf, like a book they swore they'd read eventually but never opened. And for the first time, I didn't want to wait to be picked anymore. Success doesn't always arrive with applause. Sometimes it walks in through the back door, quietly, unnoticed, while everyone's still looking the other way. After years of being the forgotten one in my family, I stopped trying to be visible to them. Instead, I poured everything into something that made me feel seen. It started small, just a few designs I posted online. Hand-sewn pillowcases, minimalist lamps I crafted in my tiny apartment, a blog where I shared photos of cozy spaces, captioned with quotes no one in my family would ever read. At first, it was more therapy than ambition, but then someone ordered a custom set from Colorado, then another from Portland, a feature in a small design magazine, a call from a boutique hotel in Austin. Suddenly, my hobby had a wait list. I filed the LLC paperwork for my home interior business the same day my cousin Michelle got promoted at her firm. The family group chat exploded with congrats and champagne gifts for her. When I quietly shared my news, all I got was a thumbs-up emoji from my mom. No questions, no follow-up. No one even asked what I named the business, and it would have been fine if it hadn't been for my brother's voice ringing in my head. "Oh, cool, you're doing throw pillows now?" He'd said once at a family barbecue, with a smirk so sharp I felt it for weeks. Like what I built wasn't real, like it was a craft fair stall, not a company. But behind the silence and side-eyes, I was building something. I was learning to negotiate, to pitch, to fail and start again. I learned to file taxes, read contracts, navigate supply chains, and manage cash flow. I learned how to get back up after a shipping company lost $3,000 worth of inventory 2 days before Christmas. I cried on the floor of my studio more nights than I care to admit. There were moments I almost gave up. Nights I would have traded all the sales for a simple "I'm proud of you" from someone, anyone, in that family. But the turning point came the night I was invited to speak at a small design summit in Chicago. I was terrified. I had built this business behind a screen, behind silence, behind invisibility. What if I stepped into the light and no one cared? But they did. People lined up after my talk. Not just to compliment the aesthetics, but to thank me for making spaces feel like sanctuary, for seeing beauty in quiet corners, just like I had always wished someone would see me. That night, in a hotel room overlooking the city skyline, I realized I didn't need my family's validation anymore. They hadn't seen me, sure, but others did. Strangers who believed in the vision I nurtured alone. Customers who came back for every new collection. Women who emailed me saying, "You made me feel at home again." I was still the quiet one, still not invited to big family dinners, still not the star of the group chat. But now, I had built something louder than any praise they withheld. And for the first time, I wasn't ashamed of the silence. I wore it like armor. I was no longer waiting to be seen. I was creating spaces where people, like me, could feel visible. And that, to me, was louder than any applause. I didn't book Villa Azul out of spite. I need to say that because, for a long time, even to myself, I wasn't sure. It had been 3 days since the group chat incident. 3 days of silence, of pretending I was too busy to care. But the truth was, I couldn't stop thinking about it. Not because I wanted to be part of their plans anymore, but because something in me had shifted. It wasn't anger, it was clarity. They weren't going to see me unless I made myself impossible to ignore. But I wouldn't scream, I wouldn't beg. I would do something else, something they couldn't brush off with a thumbs-up emoji. So I typed the words slowly, deliberately. Villa Azul, Marbella, oceanfront, private pool, chef on call. The pictures alone looked like a dream I wasn't supposed to touch. And maybe that was the point. I booked it, in full, 7 nights. And then, as if guided by something deeper than logic, I began customizing the stay. I asked the concierge to stock the kitchen with apricot preserves, something my grandmother used to spoon onto toast every morning. I requested fresh eucalyptus in the bathrooms because my mother once told me the scent made her feel like she was finally breathing right. I added white peonies to the terrace vase. My dad always said they were too showy, which somehow made me want them more. I even selected the soft jazz playlist for arrival, choosing the same tracks my uncle used to hum while grilling in the backyard, back when things felt less complicated. These weren't random luxuries. They were threads of a tapestry I'd spent a lifetime trying to weave. Comfort, memory, identity. And now, I was wrapping myself in it, not to impress anyone, but to remind myself I existed. For once, I didn't want to be practical. I didn't want to downplay, dim, or simplify. I wanted to take up space. Beautiful, scented, sea breeze space. I hired a Rolls-Royce with a driver for the week. Yes, I could have rented something modest, but when I stepped into the back seat and saw my reflection in the car window, sunglasses, hairpin just right, I didn't see the quiet one anymore. I saw a woman who had arrived, not in anyone else's story, but in her own. I sent a single photo to the group chat. No caption. Just me, standing on the villa balcony, in a linen jumpsuit, the ocean behind me. No one replied, not for hours. But eventually, my cousin Michelle reacted with a heart. Then silence again. And honestly, that was fine. Because this wasn't about their reactions anymore. It was about mine. I walked through the villa barefoot, tracing the tiles with my toes, inhaling the lemony clean scent of fresh linens. I sat by the infinity pool, letting the sun kiss my skin, and whispered aloud, just once, I'm here. Not as an invitation, not as a plea. Just a quiet declaration to the universe. I exist, I matter. And I am no longer waiting for permission to be seen. The Rolls-Royce Phantom came to a quiet stop in front of the seaside house. The driver, dressed in a black suit, stepped out and gently opened the rear door. Then, a pair of silver high heels touched the ground, softly, like a silent declaration. For a moment, the entire backyard froze. Laughter and conversation were abruptly cut off, suspended in the air as if someone had just hit the pause button on an old cassette tape. Heads began to turn, and when they saw me, their eyes widened in shock, confusion, as if they were witnessing something that didn't belong in the familiar world they had so comfortably locked themselves into. I stepped out of the car. The sunset cast long shadows across the stone path. The red-tiled roof and white balcony railings shimmered with amber light, as if the house itself was trying to hold onto a memory it wasn't quite ready to let go of. I wore a cream-colored dress, tailored to fit. Nothing ostentatious, but enough to say, I was no longer the girl they once knew. My hair was neatly pinned up, my lips painted a deep wine red. The click of my heels echoed with each slow, deliberate step, resonating through the air that had suddenly turned oddly still. I saw them before they could process what was happening. The entire family was gathered around the long wooden table beneath strings of warm yellow lights draped across the backyard. Plates of grilled seafood, half-empty bottles of wine, a bowl of mango salad. The atmosphere had been lively just minutes ago. Now, it felt like the sound had been vacuumed out of the world. All that remained was the distant crashing of waves and a faint early 2000s R&B tune playing from a Bluetooth speaker. My mother was the first to stand. Her chair scraped against the stone with a sharp screech. She raised a hand to her mouth, eyes wide, clearly unsure if what she was seeing was real. "L'Oreal? You actually came?" I smiled softly, calmly. "Saw a familiar house from the beach. Thought I'd drop by." No one said a word. I walked forward, layers of silence clinging to my skin like an invisible cloak. I had imagined this moment 100 times in my head, but nothing could have prepared me for how surreal it would feel when it actually happened. To them, I was no longer the shy girl in oversized hoodies, always quiet at dinner. I had become something else, something they hadn't yet figured out how to name. My mother approached, her voice barely more than a whisper. "You came alone? Why didn't you tell us? I could have—" "It's home," I said, still smiling. "Who doesn't like a surprise?" She flinched, just a little, but said nothing more. I glanced at the table. Everything looked like it had been set up for a magazine shoot. Except for one thing, there was no place for me. That much was painfully clear. I walked to the head of the table, where Grandpa used to sit, pulled a chair from the side porch, and set it carefully in place. "Mind if I sit here?" No one said no, but no one said yes either. Aunt Diane, my mom's older sister, suddenly remembered she needed to check on the crab cakes, even though the meal was already served. My cousin Laura Kufhe got a very important call and stepped toward the driveway. My brother furrowed his brow as if trying to remember whether he'd ever added me to the family group chat. Still, I sat, back straight, legs crossed gracefully. I poured myself a glass of cold juice from the pitcher in the center of the table and took a slow sip as if I belonged here. Because in truth, I always had. They just never made room for me. It wasn't the dress or the watch on my wrist that unsettled them. It was the calm, the confidence, the way I didn't apologize for being here. They were used to the version of me that always said sorry, for taking up space, for having feelings, for daring to dream. That girl was easy to manage, but the woman now sitting before them was a reminder that you can't erase someone just by forgetting to invite them. That sometimes the one pushed furthest away is the one who returns, standing tallest. Finally, my brother cleared his throat, trying to sound casual. Staying at a hotel nearby?" I looked him straight in the eye, still smiling gently, but my gaze no longer carried the innocence it once had. "Not a hotel," I replied, my voice soft like sea breeze. "I'm staying at the 5-star villa next door, right on the cliff, overlooking the ocean. Close enough to see who's sitting in my seat." I paused, lifted my glass, and took another slow sip, as if time itself rested in the palm of my hand. Then I set it down, my eyes sweeping over the entire table like a formal invitation without an actual card. "Tomorrow night, I'd like to invite everyone over for dinner at the villa." I smiled. "I've arranged for a private chef, set the menu. There'll be French wine, Dad's favorite seafood dishes, and the white orchids Mom used to keep in the living room." A few heads lifted instinctively. Someone paused mid-bite. A hand almost dropped a wine glass. No one spoke, but I could feel it. They were really seeing me now. I let the silence hang in the air like a deliberate echo. It spread across the garden, between the soft lights and the steady sound of waves, as if nature itself was holding its breath, waiting to see what would happen next. I didn't need approval. I didn't need permission. I just needed them to see that I had returned. And this time, not to ask for a seat, but with an invitation of my own. I stood as the sun disappeared behind the cliffs. I didn't wait for anyone to reply. I expected nothing. Because sometimes, coming back isn't about being welcomed. It's to remind them I was never really gone. The next evening, just as the sky turned a soft lavender over the water, the villa lit up. I had it prepped hours in advance. Foyer, soft garden lights glowing like fireflies along the stone path, flameless candles lining the long dining table on the back terrace, and a quiet jazz playlist humming through the built-in speakers. There was a breeze off the ocean, light enough to lift the linen napkins, just enough to carry the smell of grilled lemon garlic sea bass and rosemary focaccia through the air. Everything was curated, intentionally. From the signature elderflower spritz served in frosted glasses, to the way each seat at the table had a handwritten name card, not just names, but a single word beneath each. Words that represented what I remembered about each of them. Loyal, for my cousin Laura. Sharp, for Diane. Even stubborn, for my brother. His eyebrows raised when he saw it. Mine didn't. They arrived hesitantly, one car at a time. No one knew what to expect. I could see it in their eyes, the confusion, the caution. But the food softened them. It always did. That was the one thing we'd always had in common. We could fight across generations, but no one ever turned down a good meal. Dinner began lightly. Laughter came in measured bursts. Compliments about the setup, the food, the view. My mother commented on the hydrangeas I'd arranged at the center of the table. "You always did have a touch for this kind of thing," she said, avoiding my eyes. I smiled. "I try." We moved through the courses. First, a chilled beet salad with citrus vinaigrette. Then pasta, handmade pappardelle tossed with caramelized shallots and oyster mushrooms. People were starting to loosen. Wine helped. I let them talk. For most of the meal, I played hostess, smiling, passing plates, letting them carry the conversation. But once dessert was cleared, peach tart with vanilla crème fraîche, I stood. I hadn't planned a speech, but I also had. I tapped my glass gently. The sound echoed more than I expected. Conversations fell off, and heads turned. I looked at each of them in turn, then back to my plate and breathed in. "My name cards," I said softly, "weren't just decorations. They were memories, the way I've remembered you all, through the years, from a distance." My voice was a little shaky. My mother tilted her head. Someone coughed. "I spent years designing beautiful spaces for others," I continued, eyes now steady. "Houses that felt warm, that felt like home. But no matter how many keys I held, I never had a door that opened back into this family." Silence. I was the extra chair, the one you had to drag in from the side yard. My brother shifted in his seat. Diane stared into her wine glass. "I used to think if I worked hard enough, dressed the part, became undeniable, that you'd let me in. That one day someone would say, 'Hey, shouldn't L'Oreal be here too?'" I paused. No one blinked. But then I realized I didn't need an invitation. I just needed to build my own table. A breeze moved through, lifting the edge of the white tablecloth like a sigh. I'm not here tonight to ask for anything, not approval, not apology. I'm here because I've made peace with who I am, and I wanted you to see her. I held their gaze, not a flicker in mine. I've learned that family isn't just about blood. It's about space, who makes room for you and who doesn't. And now, I no longer wait for someone else to make that room. The silence that followed was unlike any I'd ever felt in their presence, not hostile, just still. And in that stillness, I stood taller. Because for the first time, they weren't talking over me. They were listening. The terrace lights stayed on long after dessert was cleared. No one rushed to leave. The silence after my speech didn't crack like glass. It sank slow and deep into the bones of everyone sitting there. For once, it wasn't awkward. It was respectful, necessary. Diane was the first to speak softly. I didn't know you felt that way. I did, I said. I just never said it out loud. Laura reached across the table, placing her hand gently over mine. You were always in the room, L'Oreal. We just didn't know how to see you. That was something. Not everything, but something. My brother stood awkwardly, then muttered, I'll help clear the plates. A peace offering in the form of dish duty. Classic. Even my mother, who for most of the meal had been composed and polite, like someone attending a gala they didn't entirely enjoy, seemed less rigid now. Her fingers clutched her napkin, twisting it, untwisting it. She didn't speak, but her eyes followed me with something raw behind them. Not judgment, not distance. Something closer to awe, or grief. When everyone had settled back inside the villa's lounge, I stood again, this time without clinking a glass. Just a small wave. I have something to show you, I said. If you'll come with me. I led them down the hallway, to a side room they hadn't noticed before. I opened the double doors. It wasn't just a workspace. It was a story. Tall panels displayed large-scale visuals of my projects, hotel lobbies, rooftop cafes, boutique retail interiors that now existed in 5 different cities. Spotlights hit each board with intentional warmth, like in a gallery. Along the side table were neatly stacked folders, custom-printed pitch decks, one for each of them, with their names embossed in gold foil. The room was silent again, but it was a different kind of silence now. Reverent. I handed one to my mother. She took it slowly, eyes flickering across the clean layout, the numbers, the photos of the before and after spaces. Then she paused. Page 7, a photo of me, standing alone in an unfinished office space, bare concrete, exposed ducts, holding a clipboard and wearing the only blazer I owned at the time. Beneath it, a caption. Project Delta, Year 2, self-funded after investor withdrawal, $5,000 in savings, zero safety net. Her hands trembled. That $5,000. She knew exactly what it was, knew exactly who I had quietly asked for help back then, and who had said it wasn't the right time. She started, but the words caught. I turned to the others, gesturing toward the back wall. A digital screen showed a timeline of the brand. Logo evolution, key milestones. At the center, a looping 3-minute video montage of construction, transformation, launch events, overlaid with one sentence, designed to hold people's best moments, even when mine were falling apart. They kept watching. I pointed to one framed layout on the side. This was the Green and Slate project, right after my first business partner ghosted me and took 2 clients with him. I nearly went under. Didn't even have the money to sue. Someone whispered, "But you didn't quit." I shook my head. I sold furniture. I drove DoorDash at night. I kept designing in the morning. Then I gestured to the final display, an aerial mock-up of my biggest upcoming project, a cultural center slated to break ground next spring. Estimated value, $5 million, I said casually, like I was reading a weather report. We signed last quarter. My mother's lips parted. No sound came out. Just that look again, shaken, tender, proud, and not sure if she had the right to be. I built something beautiful, I said. Not to prove you wrong. but because I knew, deep down, I was always right about who I could be. There were no claps, just eyes that saw me, fully, for the very first time. And for me, that was more than enough. It was late. Most of the family had left the party and quietly retreated to their rooms to rest. The polite smiles and half-hearted compliments faded into the warm coastal night. The villa fell into silence, leaving only the soft sound of waves brushing the shore and the lonely creaks of the old wooden floorboards. I was on the balcony of the guest house, the one I had rented months in advance for this exact purpose. The wind carried the scent of sea salt and faint jasmine, and I was halfway through a glass of wine when I heard the door behind me open. "I figured I'd find you here," my father said. I turned slowly. He looked older than I remembered, not just in years, but in weight, the kind that settles into the shoulders and eyes. He had always been a quiet man, present, but not engaged, a background figure in every family photo, the one who paid the bills, but never stayed long enough to see the candles blown out. "You never really said much at dinner," I said, keeping my tone light. "I was listening," he replied, then paused. "At least, trying to." He walked over and stood beside me, but didn't sit. Just looked out toward the ocean like he was searching for the right words somewhere between the tide and the stars. "Your company," he started slowly. "It's impressive. I saw the portfolios, the impact reports, your speech. You've built something incredible." I waited. But it scared me. There it was. He exhaled deeply, and for the first time, he didn't sound like my father. He sounded like a man confessing a long-held regret. "My sister, your Aunt Marie, she tried something similar. Years ago. Right after college, she launched a design firm with everything she had. Took out loans, maxed out credit cards. She believed in herself, and I believed in her too, until the day the bank called and said she'd defaulted on everything. She lost the company, then her house, and for a long time herself." I looked at him. His hands were gripping the railing now. "She never really came back from it," he said, "and watching her fall apart, I told myself I'd never let that happen to my own daughter." A bitter chuckle escaped my lips. "So you decided not to believe in me at all?" He flinched, just slightly, but didn't deny it. "I thought if I didn't encourage the dream, maybe you'd choose something safer, something stable. I thought I was protecting you." Silence hung between us, thick and salt-laced. "I wasn't asking you to protect me," I said quietly. "I was asking you to see me." His eyes met mine for the first time all night. There was something raw there now. Regret, yes, but also something more difficult. Recognition. "I saw what happened when you asked for help. The loan," he murmured. "Dad knows that Mom told him about you asking to borrow $5,000, and I said no. I thought I was saving you from disappointment, but I realize now that was the moment I disappointed you the most." I nodded. My throat was tight, but my voice stayed even. "I didn't need you to fund me. I just needed to know you thought I could do it." He looked down, jaw clenched. "I'm not asking you to apologize," I continued, softer now. "That's not why I'm here. I just needed to hear the truth, to finally understand why you kept your distance." He blinked slowly, then gave a small, almost imperceptible nod. For a long while we said nothing, just stood there, two people finally stepping into the same silence that had lived between them for years. He turned to leave, hand on the doorknob, but paused. "You did it," he said. "With or without me, you did it." This time, I smiled, not with triumph, but with peace. "I know," I whispered. And in that moment, I didn't feel like the forgotten daughter anymore. I felt seen. When the last car pulled away from the villa, I remained behind. No more laughter, no more lingering glances. Just me, and the quiet, no longer something I feared. I walked slowly through the main hallway, the late afternoon sun spilling in through the tall glass panels. The workspace still carried the scent of wood and paper, the idea board half filled, the chair where I'd spent countless nights bent over sketches. Everything was familiar, but today it all felt softer, like it was breathing with me. On the wall hung a wooden frame, an old printed email from my father. No words of advice, no expressions of pride, just a few simple lines that I once read over and over again, clinging to something unfinished. Today, for the first time, I looked at it without feeling a sting. I smiled, because I no longer needed acceptance. I had already accepted myself. I didn't show up to impress. I showed up to exist, and that at last was enough. To the ones they forgot, to the ones who remember themselves,